Okay, welcome back, everyone, for another episode of Demystifying Your Careers. I'm not sure which episode this is. It's been so many, but we are fortunate to have Lindsey Bounocore to be a part of us today. She is an extensive experience HR and talent acquisition person um, who has been working at multiple tech companies. She actually attended Trinity College at Harvard. And yeah, we're super excited to have her here representing Rapid7 because she's working there right now. Let's start off by diving into your high school career. So love to learn more about sort of like where you grew up and sort of
Sure.
like your senior year of high school.
Of course. Yeah. I actually grew up in Hopkinton, Massachusetts, which, if anyone is familiar with the Boston Marathon, that's where it
Gotcha.
starts. I went to boarding school for all 4 years of high school at a small place called St. Mark's. I actually was only 10 minutes from where I grew up, but I had the full boarding experience there. And my senior year of high school, just trying to think back, I think I was really focusing on getting into college at that point. I don't even I played sports in high school, soccer mostly, and, just tried to get as many courses as I could under my belt, obviously,
Gotcha.
because I thought that was going to get me into college.
So, okay, were you like a super nerd?
I wouldn't say a super nerd. I did love to study.
Okay.
Sometimes I still miss studying, but I know that sounds crazy, but it just felt very structured. So I like that.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah,
So you like the structuredness of how the classroom is and stuff like that.
absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. I'm the complete opposite. I like to learn stuff on my own and no one
Most
tells me
people
what to
are.
do.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So at that point in your life, I mean, I ask this question all the time. It's like sometimes people know exactly what they want to do when they grow up. And you get these questions all the time. And I guess at that point in time, did you already know what you wanted to do?
Oh, God, no. I think I remember actually we were going around in senior year talking about what we wanted to be, and I wanted to be a news anchor. Obviously, that is not the career path that I took. But yeah, so kind of totally different from where I am today.
Gotcha. So you thought you were going to be a news anchor.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was that also part of the decision or thought process that made you decided to apply to certain type of colleges?
That's a really good question. You think it would. I think what I actually was comfortable with was a smaller liberal arts school where I could probably take a bunch of different classes. I didn't want to go to a big school. So I looked mostly in the NASCAC schools. So like at Bowdoin, at Trinity, Amherst, colleges like that, knowing I wanted just that smaller college experience. And I definitely wanted to stay in New England.
Gotcha. So what made you decided to pick Trinity College?
Yeah, I actually remember just going on a tour on campus, and it just felt like the right place. So I applied early, got in, and I actually didn't go through with the rest of the colleges because I got in, I think, in must have been November or so. So the rest of my year, I felt like, that weight had been lifted.
Gotcha. Must have been a stressful experience, and I bet that when deciding to go to this college, you must have felt like it was more of the environment, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just had a feel when I was on campus. I'd known some upperclassmen there that had gone to St. Mark's too. So it just felt like home to me. And I loved the campus. So it was a no-brainer for me.
So it says on LinkedIn that you decided to study art history. Why is
Oh
that?
yeah. Yeah. So that was interesting. So actually at St. Mark's, I was introduced to art history. There was an AP elective that you could take this class. So I just took this class, became super passionate about art history. I thought this was just going to be something, that was just cool to learn. When I got to college, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So my first semester, I spent a lot of time, I was really interested in biology, and I spent a lot of classroom time doing that. Ultimately, I found my way back into the art history. I loved it. I wanted to study abroad. I wanted to learn to speak Italian. I did end up studying abroad in college. I did not learn how to speak Italian. But I think I just loved art history.
Why?
Um,
What is it so
so
particularly interesting?
yeah.
Because from my experience, because I was so so I went to Northeastern studying mechanical engineering. So I had a lot of STEM teacher who were just
Yeah.
like crapping on art history majors.
Totally. My own parents are crapping on art history majors, so I get it.
Yeah. So I guess, what made you decide to have that confidence to pursue art history and just basically, screw everyone else. I want to do what I want to do.
So I love that question. So what I loved about art history was I liked learning about history, but like in the context of like what people were creatively producing at the time, right? Like it wasn't sitting there learning necessarily about wars or, in a classroom like you would in a traditional history class. I was actually getting to see like, okay, why did someone get commissioned to paint this? Or why did someone decide to paint something or, sculpture, whatnot? And ultimately, I spent most of my junior and senior year focusing more on Renaissance art simply because I went to Florence to study abroad. So I just kind of chose to go with a passion in
That's
college.
so cool.
I didn't choose to go with what I still didn't know what I was going to do for a career. I definitely didn't actually want to work in any kind of art setting. I'm actually not a good artist. And I wasn't going to work in a museum and I wasn't going to be an art critic. So I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but I knew I loved learning it. So it's pretty much only useful the handful of times that I've been to Europe or in a museum here in the US.
Well, maybe if, we can continue our conversation, you can actually draw some points back. I'll try to reconnect back to the art history stuff.
We'll see if you can do it.
Okay. So during college, do you have any sort of internships in between?
Yeah, I actually had an internship in an advertising agency, like a smaller advertising agency for my sophomore and junior year. And then my senior year, I actually interned in an HR department at New England Baptist Hospital. I had a cousin that worked there and she was like, we have an internship like opening, would you be interested? And I was like, I don't really know anything about HR, but I'd actually be super interested in learning. So I did do that internship my senior year and like also in the summer. So I would do it like on my breaks, but then also picked it back up again.
So things I'm curious about is,
sure.
I think the marketing agency made sense from where you were just studying art history because there's a lot of art involved in marketing, right? So then I'm curious as to what you've learned from the marketing experience, and did that influence you to decide to pursue this the HR path?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with marketing, I was able to work really collaboratively with people on projects. Again, it was a really small agency, so it was just me, right? So I could step in and help wherever. I loved like learning from creative people, but I also loved that there was like a business side to it. I actually found myself not gravitating towards the creative piece at all. And I was like, oh, like I like kind of the order of things and the order of business.
That's so surprising.
Yeah. So when I got the opportunity to work in HR, I was like, okay, still kind of more on the back end, like how companies work. In this instance, it was a hospital, but I was still thinking like, okay, like I don't know what I want to do with this, but like I'm getting closer to figuring it out.
Wow. I wonder if it has to do with your love of studying in school, having the structure, and knowing how it all ties together.
Totally. I love that you're still trying to tie it back. Yeah.
Awesome. So tell me more about your experience during this first HR internship. Like in terms of, I guess, how do you land the internship? I'm curious about that because a lot of people would be interested in figuring out how to get their first internship. And do you have any tips on that too?
Yeah. So just networking, right? Like my cousin worked, she was like a senior, HR business partner there. mentioned like, are you interested in this? And I was like, absolutely. Like, I was like, to be clear, I don't know anything about HR. And she said, you don't have to.
Yeah.
A lot of what I did during that internship was more along the lines of like, I would do like the back end of the office stuff. So like coding things in their HRIS, which is the human resource information system. So like basically where everybody keeps employee records. So like I worked really heavily with employee records. I'd also get an opportunity to call candidates that were, in this instance, nurses or like administrative people, and get them scheduled for different like interviews that they were having, get them prepared for their interviews. So I had an exposure to kind of the whole gamut of HR. It just happened to be in, a medical setting.
That's a really fortunate opportunity, because a lot of
Yeah.
internship is just paperwork, and you just input data and you put that as your experience. But you had an opportunity to have exposure to every single department. Okay, so you're in the healthcare space, and I'm guessing this was senior year, right?
This was senior year. Yeah. This
Okay.
was going into senior year and senior year. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm following your LinkedIn now after college, because this is the first experience that popped up. Executive recruiter at the Mergis group. I was like, okay, well, you just went from an intern to an executive recruiter. How did that work?
Totally. So a couple things. One, I graduated in 2009, and if any people listening probably aren't familiar with this, but there was pretty big, obviously, issues with the economy at that point.
They're familiar with it pretty well now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it feels really similar, right? Like people aren't sure. Like there's just like this huge uncertainty. So graduating in 2009, I was like, what am I going to do? I was trying to apply to human resource jobs, but I was like, I wasn't, they really weren't a ton of jobs. There just weren't a lot of jobs. I was kicking myself for not taking economics or finance or something so practical and useful that obviously everybody's parents tell them to take, but I didn't. So what wound up happening was I, through a connection, I heard of the Mergis Group. They're actually owned by Randstad now, but they're a recruiting agency. So again, kind of similar to like the HR career that I thought, like, okay, I can do this. But it was for hiring permanent placements for accounting and finance. Again, I don't know anything about accounting and finance. So my first job there was just placing people into accounting and finance jobs. Again, there just really weren't a ton of jobs in that space, but it was such a great opportunity for me because I truly learned so much about like how recruiting worked, like how to source for candidates, which, you're going on LinkedIn, you're searching, different criteria, you're entering things into, we didn't have Salesforce, but whatever their version of it was to kind of qualify those leads. It had like a sales component, but also working with, people that were on the job market at the time. And it was just a really interesting way to kind of cut my teeth and get exposure. It was a little bit more nerve-wracking because if anybody's familiar with like, how recruiting agencies usually work, it's mostly commission. So you have a draw on your salary, but it's mostly commission based. At that time, it just really wasn't a very lucrative industry for me to be in. But again, I did learn a lot from that first job.
I didn't know recruiters have commission. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, a lot of agencies do. So not like when you're working for a company. So like at Rapid7, our recruiters are salaried. But if you were to work at an agency, it's really a sales job. They're like, they're going out, they're finding business, they're bringing business in. So companies that, need their staffing. And then you have to find people to fill those jobs.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, then you jump from one group to another group. I'm very familiar with Hollister staffing.
Yeah, Hollister was great. So I still did accounting and finance there. Still, worked on a permanent, and recruiting is similar to sales. We call it like our desk. So I ran a full desk, which means that I tried to do business development, getting companies to join or to use Hollister services. And I also had to find candidates to fill the roles. So I was there for a little while. And ultimately what I just figured was like, this just, I didn't want to be in like a sales role. And hats off to all the people that are in sales, because like I have the utmost respect. Since then I've been working, supporting sales teams. I just truly like, what a tough job.
Yeah.
So it wasn't for me. But I was like, I love recruiting. I would love to do this in-house. And can I go on and talk about OpenView?
Not yet.
Okay.
Because
Okay. I won't jump ahead.
This is a particular moment in time when it's really interesting to dive into your thought process. So the two things I want to learn is, how did you get these roles in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
What type of technique? So I've talked to a lot of people. There's two ways. One, traditionally sending in your resume through Indeed or LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Two is somehow finagle a connection within the organization that get you in. So which path did you take here?
So both times it was through connection. So friend of a friend, just like talking and then following up and being like, hey, like, would you mind making an introduction? That is actually how I've gotten all my jobs.
So, okay. During the interview process, because you were a recruiter previously, you used the same experience to go for your next job. Did you find that helpful? Like thinking in terms of what exactly would be the advice you would give for a lot of people who are trying to get their first job? What would what kind of advice would you give
That's
them?
a great question. And I would say, and I tell anybody this, like, get creative. Like you might think like, oh, I don't know anybody in advertising, or I don't know anybody in human resources. Like you do, because all the people that who are working have access to people. So it just means starting a dialogue. And it doesn't mean like, hey, what roles are open? It's like, hey, this is what I'm interested in. Like, where do you think I could fit in an organization? Like, I sometimes like, I didn't know enough to actually know what to ask for. So it was just having those conversations.
Gotcha. So at this point in time, did you know how each department of the company works together? It just seems like you are singularly focused on this recruiting aspect, which is only one function.
I didn't. I truly didn't. I have to say, like, I learned a lot about accounting and finance because that's where I was placing. Mm-hmm. I learned a lot about recruiting, but I didn't know like how companies come together to make decisions and how, how much you would rely on legal and on, different areas of the business and how different areas impact my job. That came with experience. That wasn't something that I truly learned right away.
At which point? So here you're allowed to skip ahead. OpenView, Sonian, Acria, or Rapid7 was when that clicked.
Was the job, I would say, that I was able to kind of, and it was because it was a small startup that I got a chance to really collaborate. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I can't do my job without these other people. And that's kind of how I was able to open up and think differently, about the broader picture.
Gotcha. So, okay. We'll dive back into that. But first, OpenView. Now, this is really interesting because OpenView is a VC firm.
Yeah.
It's not a typical tech company, and not a lot of people who just like are graduating school and be like, I'm going to work for a VC. That is a very subset, small amount of people. So how do you end up here?
Yeah. So this is a great story. So while I was at Hollister, got a call from OpenView, and they said to me, they're like, hey, we have an opening on our business development team, which is sales. And they're like, we found in the past that hiring people out of recruiting agencies is great because, they're organized, they're able to be on the phones, they have that like polish to be able to, call and try to qualify potential investments. And I was like, yeah, no, I don't want to do sales. I was like, but call me back if you ever have any jobs that are in human resources or recruiting. I didn't hear from them for several months. And then like 6 months later, I got a phone call and they said, hey, we actually have a job recruiting. It's going to be for our portfolio companies. So basically, I was in a branch of this VC firm that was they did all kinds of things. Like it was more consultative, jobs. So like they would do things like market analysis, and recruiting was one of them. We did have people that did business development for those companies too. So I really focused in on that job. And I was like, yes, I want that recruiting job that you have. And so when they had an opening, they were like, we talked to you, 6 months ago, you took the call. We were really, impressed with you. Would you want to come interview for this? So again, it was kind of a creative way. I was like, no, I don't want to be in sales. I'm not going to leave the company that I'm at right now because I really liked Hollister, without, basically having a plan for what I actually want to do, which was recruit in-house.
Huh. So were you in charge of hiring for multiple companies under
Yes.
OpenView? Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't recruit specifically for OpenView, but any company that they invested in, these were smaller companies. They were the B or C round of funding.
Mm-hmm.
So typically like they didn't have internal recruiters. So when they needed to hire, and this was an awesome job because I got to hire all over the US.
Gotcha. So let me spend a little bit of time to clarify this for the audience. So a VC firm basically give money for companies who are starting from the ground, depending on how big they are, injection of multiple millions of dollars, then they're going to need to find people like you to help find more talent to those organizations so that they could grow. This is very interesting is because you have previously have 3 jobs that are not really particular focused on one particular company.
Mm-hmm.
And then next after this is Sonian.
Yes.
And this is essentially...
it's one company, yeah.
Yep.
So Sonian actually was a portfolio company of OpenView. So I did a lot of hiring for Sonian in like sales and finance. And what was great about OpenView is it was actually really encouraged that after you hit about 2 years there, if there wasn't a role that you wanted there, they really encourage you to go work for one of the portfolio companies. So I had a great relationship with Sony, and they needed someone that was going to be doing, recruiting and human resources. So combining my interests at a small company where I could kind of really cut my teeth and be a one-woman show there, I got to do that, which was awesome. So I made the move there, still in the OpenView family, but working particularly for one of their investments.
Gotcha. How does that experience like?
I loved it. I think I got to do so many different things there that I wouldn't have gotten to do if I was on a bigger team.
Yeah.
I did everything from working with benefits brokers to, find the right healthcare plans, to helping with payroll, to employer relations, also handled all the recruiting. It was at its peak, I think, when I was there, about 70 people. So it wasn't a huge company, but I was really busy doing all these different things. We, as I mentioned in an earlier comment about a HRIS, so like that human resource system, I got to pick one for the company. So like doing all my due diligence that way as well. So I got a lot of exposure to things, I probably wasn't even ready to do, but got to do them. And I just had to ask a ton of questions, ask for a lot of help. And it was just an incredible experience.
That's incredible. I think part of it is because, do you think that because Sonian was small, that's why you were able to get plugged into so many different things? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huh. So I think the advice here is if you really want to understand how it all comes together, work for a smaller company first.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how it worked out for me, right? I was able to learn so quickly, and I don't think I would have had that experience had I worked on a big team,
Hey, is Acquia and Rapid7 under OpenView?
No. So Acquia actually, I had taken a call about a job there, but that I wasn't ready to leave Sony at the time. And I took it with a recruiter who is actually now my current manager at Rapid7. So we can dive into that later.
Nice.
But I was like, I'm not ready to leave. And then about 6 months later, she called me again and she was like, I actually got like my dream job. I love Acquia. I want to set them up before I leave with a recruiter who can handle all of global sales. And I was like, okay, I'm willing to have that conversation. So she made the introduction on her way out. And I actually wound up working there for quite some time, and wasn't part of OpenView's portfolio, but was definitely like a great experience having been in a smaller company. Well, now I was in a company of about 700 people, which was the biggest company I'd worked at.
10x the amount of Sonia.
Exactly.
Okay. Interesting. So what made you decide to make this move?
It was after 2-ish years at Sonian. I was tapped out in terms of like what I could teach myself, and I needed to learn from other people. I needed to be on a bigger team. I needed to collaborate. And I made that move there, and I wasn't actually sure in the moment that I was making the right move going back into just recruiting, because I was doing both at Sonian.
Yeah.
But I was like, I want a job that's a little bit more fast paced. I want a bigger company, and I just want to like learn. I just want to be exposed to, different areas of the business and be able to use my expertise and like just learn from other recruiters. So it wound up being a pretty good opportunity to do so.
It is very interesting to me because a lot of people would be afraid to just take the leap to the next like big opportunity. There's a lot of imposter syndrome involved. Like, do you ever feel the fear for a lot of these roles? And if you do, how do you overcome those things?
Oh my God. Yeah. So I remember saying to someone, I'm like, I don't know that I'm qualified for, the job that I'm doing. And they were like, well, they wouldn't have hired you if they didn't think that. But it is true that there's something to be said. Like, if you are taking a job that is truly like a level up from you, like, it's okay not to know everything. And I think one of the mistakes I made at Acquia was like, I felt like I just had to know everything when I walked in the door, and I just didn't. Like, so being vulnerable in your first like months there to like actually ask the questions, get the help that you need, get the clarification you need, like those things are so important. Like, I wish I could go back in a time machine and be like, you don't need to know everything. Like, it's totally fine. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
I feel like depending on the different culture of the company, that would make you feel comfortable being vulnerable in that regards. Because I feel like are also companies who is just freaking hardcore. Like, you gotta get like, get through the learning curve within a week or else you're fired. Ugh. Yeah.
I thankfully haven't been at those companies. I'm sure they're out there. I'm sure they don't retain their employees as long as other companies do, though.
Gotcha. So, okay, before we dive into Rapid7, I want to talk about sort of like some of your failures, right?
Yeah.
It's like, why did you fail? And I feel like along our conversation, there has been a lot of success. There has just been a lot of impressive thing. And for the audience, it's I think to ground ourselves, we have to talk about some of those obstacles that you overcome and what type of mindset do you have surrounding that?
So, like I said, I think when I first joined Acquia, I just felt like I needed to know everything. So it was like 3 months in when I was like, I actually don't know how like the sales team like hits their quota. And that's something I'm talking to people about every day, on the phone, trying to bring them into the company, like things like that, where I was just like, why did I have to pretend like I knew everything? And I got to the point where I had to like actually raise my hand to my boss and be like, listen, I need help because I'm getting overwhelmed by the questions. And he was shocked because he's like, oh, you seem like you knew what you were doing, and I was just letting you go. Like, I didn't want to interrupt you. And I'm like, no, I'm drowning. I don't know how to answer some of the questions I'm being asked. So, now that I'm, at Rapid7 and bringing people on and I watch this happen, my advice to anyone starting new jobs is like, just be vulnerable. Like, you do not know, you may know your job. You may be the master of your craft, but you don't know how to do it at that company. And that's okay. Like, you'll learn the ins and outs of how that company works, but just be vulnerable and ask the questions. And I think that that was something that I wasn't willing to do at Acquia that I learned like very quickly, like would have made me successful much earlier on.
Gotcha. So what would you say makes you a good recruiter?
Um, that's a great question. I think, just in general, I love talking to people. I'm passionate about what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm passionate about building organizations. Like to me, it's very cool working at the company that we hire people for, because on their first day when they're taking the tour, you have like a small win being like, oh, I just hired a new awesome person for this company. Like that feels great. The other part of it is like, yeah, I didn't love sales, but there's aspects of recruiting that's kind of like the thrill of like finding people that are going to be like game changers in your organization, or working on roles that are really hard to fill, that you can do it, but it's going to stretch you a little bit and you're going to learn a little bit. So like, that's particularly what I really enjoy about it. And I really awesome. Like the best feeling is watching someone walk in on their first day and, you're a familiar face to them. And that they're going to have a great impact on the company.
It seems like, because you have switched from companies to companies to companies, and I've also talked to a lot of people who have stayed at one particular company, say for example HubSpot, for like 12 years. I was like, how do you do that?
My husband's been there for like 9 years.
Well, so I guess the question is like, in terms of staying committed to a place for a long time. Look, as far as we know, you could have decided to stay at Sonian for forever, right?
Yeah.
And I guess, is it just because of serendipity that Acquia contacted you? If it wasn't for that, like, what was your mentality in terms of?
So I was always committed to my growth. When I feel like I have reached the point where I wasn't learning, like I was committed to figuring out what that next step was. The difference is early in my career, I was just like, well, this doesn't work, next, as opposed to now I'm like thinking, logically, like, where do I want to be? What do I want to do? And at what point do I make those decisions? So leaving Acquia was a really hard decision because I love that company. Like I love my team. I love the people I work with. I supported all of global sales. It was hard to make that decision, but I had run out of runway and I needed a challenge. Rapid7 is a fantastic company. And I knew I was going to learn so much, like, because I learned so much even in the interview process. So it was.
Well, then let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how was the interview process like at Rapid7? How did you even get to Rapid7 in the first place? Is that also another referral?
So the woman that contacted me at Acquia, who left to go actually to Rapid7, and I took her job there.
Nice.
Then right before I was getting married, was like, I have a job at Rapid7, and I said, the timing is not right for me. Like I'm going to get married. I'm going on my honeymoon. I can't even think about this right now. But she was persistent. And over the holidays, she reached back out. She's like, hey, are you ready to talk yet? Like I have a role leading go to customer at Rapid7. And I would love, I'd love you to work for me. And she and I had kept in touch. Like, even though we never worked together, like I'd see her at career fairs. We would grab coffee sometimes. We'd grab lunch sometimes. So it was like, she just became kind of a mentor to me. And then, when she had this opportunity at Rapid7, I was just like, absolutely. Like I will definitely, hear you out. And in learning about Rapid7 and, I respected her career growth, I knew it had to be a special place because she was super passionate about what she was doing there and the team that she was building. So that's kind of how I even came to interview with Rapid7.
Gotcha. So what would you say is the most challenging aspect as a recruiter for those recruiters who are listening and also incoming recruiters to sort of like expect the challenges ahead?
Yeah. So I think relying on like the market, right? So, and go to customer, like the past couple years, so underneath me is like sales recruiting. Let's just take that as an example. Well, we know tech sales, it is super competitive to find people, right? Because, there's a million places in Boston hiring and they're all awesome companies. And it's like, you have to kind of differentiate yourself. So it's like, we're competing with the rest of the market. So that is really difficult. And the other thing is like, obviously at times like this, when we want to be doing tons of hiring and obviously things are uncertain, slowing that down, it's like recruiters are just like, go, go, go. We want to be hiring all the time. And sitting with that uncertainty sometimes is tough. So we rely so much on the market and like the pool of people available. The pool of people available right now is huge, but we don't have the capacity obviously to hire everybody. So
That's interesting. So from what I see, you're the type of person who is such a go-getter. Two is like just pursuing to learn the things that you wanted to learn. And then when an opportunity essentially presents itself and it sort of like matches up with where you want to grow into, you jump on it right away, because sometimes you outgrow the organization itself, just like at Sonian. That's really cool. Not a lot of people have that go-getter mentality. I think at a very young age, you were already pursuing your own passion. I mean, with art history.
It's a weird path to get here, but absolutely.
Okay, cool. Well, I guess if you were to give some advice for people who are trying to break into tech, like the audience would be those who are just graduating from college, how do people stand out in order to compete, for tech sales? Is like some of the most insane, gritty people you can ever meet. Like, how do you stand out, especially, I guess, for those who might not come from the prestigious school and stuff like that?
Yeah. So to stand out, I would say like number one, the first thing anybody's looking at is your resume and your LinkedIn profile. So make sure you have, that those are just like top notch. So like really like if you've had any internships, like everything's up to date. There's, description. You're not going on for 12 pages, but you're also not like 3 bullet points. So that is the one thing that like a recruiter or a hiring manager will look at and have to make a decision quickly on whether or not to move forward just based on that experience. The other thing I would say to people is, graduating now or whenever, you really have to get creative. So if you want to get into tech, you have to leverage your network. So sending out a resume, I don't want to say like that's not going to do anything, but everybody knows people that work places. And you may have to take like a crazy route to get into tech. Like, you may have to figure out, okay, like I'm going to do this job for a little while, like learn a lot about this, and then it's going to get me ready for my next job. So you have to think a little bit more long-term, but just get creative with who you know in your network. People that have graduated your college. Like I always talk to Trinity alumni. If I see that they're like a Trinity alumni, I'm just like, mostly want to hear about how they, what they thought of the school and what they're up to. But I'm always happy to network. So use that, and just kind of comb through like your own LinkedIn and see like who you know places, who your friends know, relatives. I know it sounds crazy, but like that is how you get jobs, is like having people make those introductions for you. And you just have to get creative and leverage your network. No, you haven't worked a million places, but people that have.
That's the creativity aspect may come from the art history stuff.
Still doing it. Yeah, I love it.
Okay, well, let's dive into the nitty gritty stuff. So a lot of time tech roles is so esoteric. People don't know exactly what's going on behind the scene, like what's the day-to-day look like. So for example, a salesperson, for me, I've done sales before. I write a whole bunch of cold emails and cold calls and all stuff like that. Not a lot of people knows that. And as a recruiter, what is like the primary tool that people are using? So like what's the day-to-day look like in terms of, say, 70% of your time doing?
Yeah, so it probably looks a lot like what a business development rep does, right? Like building out lists, targeting. We don't do necessarily cold calling, but we reach out to people via LinkedIn, or, we use Zoom Info, or all these different tools that are at salespeople's disposals too.
Yep.
What we do is obviously try to, find people that have the relevant skill set. So the nitty gritty is truly a lot of research to build out like a target list of candidates. And that means that you partner with the hiring manager and you ask the hiring manager, hey, are there like 10 companies that you'd love to see people come out of that, have great, sales programs, or whatever the case is, whittling down that list and then reaching out to those individuals. And obviously not all of them are going to get back to you right away. So it's like keeping those leads warm, and then you might have a conversation and they still might not be ready to move. So making notes and making sure that you are following up with those people, maybe 6 months down the road or whenever. But a lot of it isn't like, just pushing paper around. A lot of it is them doing research, also fielding inbounds, generating referrals from our own business. So like I said, you got to get creative. And that is one of the ways that we do, is we tap into our employees. Like, who have you guys worked with that you'd love to work with again? Like, that's the best way to go about it.
I'm having a sense that this is quite a stressful role, because being creative is not easy. 2 is that just the sheer volume of the contacts that you're managing. And I guess the third part is just dealing with people and their unpredictability as well.
Yeah, of course.
So
we're not selling like widgets. Like, these are people that we, all kinds of crazy things happen all the time, people, miss interviews or whatever. But I think, for the most part, what a recruiter tries to do is manage a candidate's experience with the company, and also manage the hiring manager's like expectations of the market. Gotcha. So there's like a lot of things at play that happen, that the recruiter is truly responsible for, from the time the role kicks off to the time that that person arrives on their first day, like I said. They manage that whole process.
How do you keep sane?
I mean, the same way anybody else does, right? Like, I actually thrive off of being super busy. I think most recruiters would probably feel the same. Like, I think recruiters, like, they take phone screens constantly. They love networking, all those things that are, key to, meeting the right people for your organization.
Gotcha. Are you an extrovert?
No, actually, I'm a really big homebody, but when it comes to work, like, I have no problem talking to people. But if you ask me to, like, go up and speak with a million people in a room that I didn't know anyone, I'd be like, I don't really want to do that. But I am actually an introvert with an extroverted job.
Nice. I'm an introvert as well. So.
And you're in sales, so it works.
I get introvert hangover all the time.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you just feel exhausted for days afterwards. So
totally.
Oh, Rapid7 is hiring, right?
Yeah, so we typically, we usually try to hire, kind of consistently over a bunch of quarters. We're a little bit slower this quarter, given the fact that like everybody's just kind of waiting to see what happens with the economy. But I mean, yes, we're always talking to people, networking with people. We're anticipating really strong like Q3, Q4 for hiring. So, looking ahead, like all those things are.
Yeah, the only reason why I asked that is I'm just telling the audience, apply, if you think you're a good fit, go for it. I think my last sort of ask is for your opinion in terms of like the current situation. Is there a message that you would like to send out to people in terms of, the level of uncertainty right now? I mean, just love to hear what you think.
So just drawing on my own experience graduating during the recession in 2008, 2009, I would say like you just need to be as creative as possible. That means leveraging your networks. That means maybe you take a job that is 3/4 of what you want to do, but not totally what you want to be doing. Some people get so lucky and they get their dream job right off the bat.
Yeah.
But I actually think there's a lot to be said for people that kind of find their way into where they belong in an organization, especially a tech company where there's all kinds of jobs that no one's ever heard of, all kinds of opportunity. There's truly, as they say, a butt for every seat.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, get creative, leverage your networks, don't get discouraged. You know, things do turn around. Like, I forgot truly that I graduated during that crazy time until this new crazy time came along. So it's like, things do have a way of evening out, and it may mean you just have to get a little bit more creative with, you know, your career.
Yeah. This is such an incredible journey. Thank you so much for sharing
Thank
this
you.
with us. Yeah, and I really appreciate you joining. Hope
It's a
that you
pleasure.
stay safe and well during this time, and hopefully some of the audience will apply to Rapid7.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good one.